4 training modules have been developed to support the understanding and responding to hate, racism, and discrimination on the Frontlines training. Module 1 contains an introductory welcome, land acknowledgement, content warning, and an overview of the definitions related to hate and discrimination. Module 2 contains methods and tools for identifying and addressing hate using the 5Ds bystander response tool, indicators for understanding bias, and the Coalition's Creating Equity developed Wordle tool for frontline workers and individuals. Module 3 contains information regarding the importance of reporting hate and the research findings of a study on the experiences of people who have reported hate crimes and incidents in Edmonton that was completed in conjunction with Coalition's Creating Equity's ongoing work. Module 4 contains a sample case study and provides information regarding the steps taken from the initial hate occurrence to the final resolution stages.
Welcome to Understanding and Responding to Hate, Racism, and Discrimination on the Frontlines. This training was developed by Coalition's Creating Equity, also known as CCE. CCE is a provincial initiative that brought together regional community networks, organizations, and individuals across Alberta to collaboratively address issues of discrimination, inequity, and racism. The project aim was to build capacity in areas of local community engagement, leadership support, and resource mobilization. We wish to acknowledge that though we may be receiving this training across many places, it is on Indigenous land, which is often known as Turtle Island. Recognizing that not all nations refer to this land as Turtle Island, the turtle still emphasizes life, earth, culture, and Indigenous autonomy. Acknowledgements are vital, not just for awareness of the traditional homeland of Indigenous people, but they also ask us to understand and engage with the historical, present, and future impacts of colonialism. Acknowledgements ask us to think about how we are all treaty people and what treaty means. They ask us to understand how Canada and we as individuals are complicit in Indigenous erasure. These acknowledgements ask us to accept and sit in possible moments of discomfort that we may experience during this training to help us listen, understand, and learn so that we may do better in the future. Although some content in this training may be difficult to work through, this training will cover topics on hate, racism, and discrimination, providing real-life scenarios of their impact on people. While the training encourages one to sit with moments of discomfort, it is important to check in with and allow oneself breaks for continued emotional and physical well-being. In this training, we will cover the following topics: understanding hate, racism, and discrimination, methods and tools for identifying and addressing hate, and a case study to put what we have learned into practice. Over the course of this training, we will be referring to some important definitions. While we will go into further detail throughout, here are some basics to keep in mind as we move through the training. Hate incident. Also called an incident motivated by hate, it's a non-criminal act motivated by hate towards the group an individual belongs to. An example of hate incidents would be discriminatory jokes and/or racial slurs. Hate crime, also called a crime motivated by hate. These are criminal acts motivated by hate towards the group an individual belongs to. An example of hate crime would be vandalism of a faith-based building or an assault where racial slurs are used during the act of the assault. Individual discrimination. This type of discrimination is bias or differential treatment towards the group that an individual belongs to. For example, if a customer in a store states that they don't want a particular cashier touching their items, based on the cashier's appearance, such as the color of the cashier's skin, the body art the cashier displays, or if the cashier is wearing faith-based clothing. This is an example of individual discrimination. Systemic discrimination. This type of discrimination occurs when the realities of discrimination are manifested in each of society's major parts. For example, this can manifest as an individual being repeatedly overlooked for a promotion despite being a top candidate due to their cultural identity, religious affiliation, sex, or gender identity, etc.
In Canada, hate crime is not seen as a separate crime from other crimes. Rather, all crimes have the potential to be hate motivated if hate is an aspect while a crime was committed. While hate crime is not an explicit section of the Canadian Criminal Code, there are 5 sections within it that refer to crimes that are motivated by hate. Section 318, Advocating Genocide. According to the Canadian Criminal Code, every person who advocates or promotes genocide is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment. Genocide is defined as an act committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part any identifiable group. For example, if an individual tries to encourage others to kill members of an identifiable group, whether through their speech or through documents, that individual would be advocating genocide. Section 319, Public Incitement and Willful Promotion of Hatred. In the Canadian Criminal Code, public incitement of hatred is defined as communicated statements in a public place that incites hatred against any identifiable group where such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of peace. Willful promotion of hatred is defined as communicated statements that willfully promote hatred against an identifiable group. While this does not include private conversation, the Canadian government has been discussing what private conversation entails in the online sphere. In a physical space, Section 319 may be applied in cases where, for example, an individual is attempting to promote or encourage others to hate members of an identifiable group, whether that is through spoken, communicated statements or through the use of documentation, such as hate-motivated pamphlets. The same is true in an online space and may be communicated on social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Discord, TikTok, YouTube, etc. This may be communicated in publicly available videos, chat rooms, discussion threads, and hateful memes. Section 320, Warrant of Seizure. Section 320, which is warrant of seizure, is defined as when a judge who is satisfied by information on oath that there are reasonable grounds for believing that any publication, copies of which are kept for sale or distribution in premises within the jurisdiction of the court, is hate propaganda and shall issue a warrant under their hand authorizing seizure of the copies. Plainly, this is the section of the Criminal Code that allows law enforcement officials to confiscate physical hate propaganda on a premises. The hate propaganda is defined as any writing, sign, or visible representation that advocates or promotes genocide. For example, if law enforcement enter the living quarters of an individual, regardless if that individual is being investigated for a hate-motivated incident or not, and they view hate propaganda, they are permitted to seize that documentation. Section 430, 4.1, Mischief in relation to religious property and educational institutions. In the Canadian Criminal Code, mischief refers to the destruction or damage of property or interferes with the lawful use, enjoyment, or operation of the property, or interferes with a person attempting to lawfully use, enjoy, or operate the property. Section 430, 4.1 addresses mischief that is committed in relation to religious property or educational institutions if the commission of that mischief is motivated by hate, bias, or prejudice against an identifiable group. For example, if an individual vandalizes a religious building, such as a mosque. Section 718.2, both Articles A and I, the sentencing principle. The most commonly used section of the Canadian Criminal Code in addressing hate. The sentencing principle addresses any criminal act of hate committed that is not addressed by the other sections. If a criminal act is committed, such as an assault, that evidence is found that the criminal act was motivated by hatred, bias, or prejudice of an individual based on the group they belong to, then that is deemed aggravating circumstances. If aggravating circumstances are determined to have taken place, then additional sentencing may be considered. This may include additional years of imprisonment, community service, the completion of diversity education modules, or other forms of compensation.